My name is Tariq Darwish, and I am a public sector executive advisor at SAP. And I'm very happy to be joined today by Christelle Salame, who is a partner at Artefact, a global data and AI consulting company. Christelle has vast experience in working with entities in the private and public sector to define their data strategies, set up and launch data and AI-focused initiatives. First, let's start with Christelle. Christelle, as I mentioned, you've helped organizations both in private and public sector to develop their data strategies and to launch, a lot of data initiatives and programs. So, based on your experience, why do you think data and proper data management is important for governments? What's the value for them? What's in it for them?
Yeah. Thank you, Tariq, and thank you for having me here. It's great to be able to talk about data and AI in the context of public sector. So yes, data transformation programs, actually, whether it's for public sector or even private sector, I think they achieve key strategic objectives in terms of improving decision-making by identifying potential growth opportunities, improving efficiency, as you mentioned, improving also customer experience. And a key theme also today is improving sustainability and contributing more to these kind of initiatives. But I think particularly for public sector, it is critical to start these kind of data transformation. First, in terms of data-driven decision-making, where these decisions don't only affect the entity itself, but basically have impact on the broader economy, on the citizens, residents' lives, but also attracts additional FDI, for example, and really helps in the growth of the sectors, but also of the economy and nation as a whole. The other aspect is also that government data is very valuable to be able to also enable the markets and enable different market players, but also the innovation in these sectors. So, for example, when you have open data initiatives or data monetization, or even sharing data between different government entities, this is where you would be able to start generating additional insights and more effective decision-making capabilities across the government. And this actually, specifically when we talk also about open data and these kind of initiatives, this also increases the level of transparency and accountability in the context of government. And I think one last point regarding the data transformation and talking broadly about data initiatives, we're living now in a digital world where across all government services, across all the interactions that you have, there's a lot of personal data that is being collected from citizens and residents. And having data management programs that ensure that all of this data is collected, processed, stored, and handled in a secure way is actually critical for the security and safety of citizens and residents.
That's very interesting. Yes, I agree. I mean, security is always top of mind, especially when we're talking to governments these days. Now, you mentioned a lot of nice examples. Can you maybe tell us what are some of the prominent use cases that you see implemented to be able to leverage this data and create some and realize the value and the efficiencies?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's actually when you start implementing these use cases that you start helping the decision making and generating this kind of value. Broadly speaking, I think if we think of public sector overall, not entity specific or sector specific, I would say there are 5 main broad categories where we're able to see value of use cases. I think you mentioned already some of them in the introduction. First, I would think about the customer insights that you're able to generate. Today, governments are actually collecting a lot of data from the customers. They receive complaints, they receive suggestions, they have multiple interaction touch points as well with the government. Using this data, governments would be able to understand the needs and the expectations of the customers. And in a world where we're expecting, and customers and users are expecting exceptional kind of services, this is essential to understand how to improve and better serve these customers. This actually leads to the second kind of categories, I would say, which would be around service improvement and understanding what are the challenges within the services. How can we further improve the services, make them more efficient, faster, personalized? So really tailoring the services that government entities are providing to customers. And obviously that can apply across different channels. So really how to better serve the customers again. I would say a third bucket would be related to having data-driven policymaking. So here, this would actually change depending on the sector that we're in. But again, there's a lot of policies that are being developed by different government entities, and being able to collect data around it and being able to also do additional analysis and data-driven analysis, such as economic impact assessment, or also nowcasting, looking at how these policies would impact the economy and how this, like the economy growth, would actually be affecting also how we make these policies, is also one of the key areas related to data use cases. And I think there are two other aspects that I see, that these are also applicable potentially to private sector, but very important also in the public sector. I would say the internal productivity, which actually touches upon different, what we call them, shared services within the government, or covering the HR functions, so employees, capability, skills, the regulatory functions, the finance functions, etc. So we see a lot of data use cases to improve the efficiency and the activities and processes that are being done internally. And then for many of the government entities that have an aspect of marketing, where they need to attract visitors or investments, or really positioning the country at the globally, we see that there's a lot of data marketing use cases that can be implemented. Then obviously there would be sector-specific use cases that would apply to each sector. So if we talk about transportation, that would be traffic management, for example, route optimization. There would be something different that would be for education. But these become more of sector-specific use cases.
No, this is very interesting, and I like how you categorize all of these fields, and I totally agree. I think we will have a few showcases later on to tackle specifically the internal productivity, but as well some of the elements related to fraud management and better efficient operations in terms of services, improving services. So we'll look into that. There's a lot of buzz over the last few years, especially after the launch of ChatGPT, about generative AI. We did not tackle this yet, but how do you see generative AI play a role across these use cases?
Yes, you're right. Generative AI is actually not a category of use case per se. It's more of an evolution of these data and AI technologies that would allow to generate content using AI. And this content can actually be any kind of format. So the most common one that we see today would be text, but generative AI can generate any type of content, including images, videos, and others. So when we look at generative AI, there are different types of uses for this. So we can look at it for data exploration, generating insights, so being able to talk to the data. There is an aspect of customer interaction, and I believe this is one that is also very common. So replacing kind of the chatbot, making them more intelligent and smarter. It's also about content generation, so that applies maybe for marketing, and there is productivity improvement, so that would be more internal kind of work, also looking at data quality. So if we take generative AI in the context of public sector, that would apply across each of the categories that I mentioned earlier. So I would say, for example, if you're looking at customer insights, there's a lot of data that you collect from the customer about what they're saying about the services, let's say, or challenges that they have living in a specific city, or there's a lot of complaints, but also suggestions that come from these comments from the customers. Now, there are ways using data and data science to be able to generate these insights. Generative AI would allow you to even take it to the next level, where you are able to talk to this data in an easier way, summarize what they're saying, and even summarize the suggestions that the customers would actually be providing to the government. If you take another aspect, which would be internal productivity, you can use generative AI to start drafting specific internal documents, maybe doing a summary of internal reviews. So the summarization of different documents and different inputs is also an aspect that can apply internally. On the aspect of marketing or data marketing specifically, using generative AI allows you to adapt content in a more specific way, tailored way, and having a more personalized experience of the customer. So really, it's about understanding in each of these categories of use cases, what are we trying to achieve, and how generative AI can actually be embedded in these use cases in order to make them more efficient and more effective.
No, definitely, I hear you. And along the same lines, we recently announced an AI use case to enhance internal productivity, especially in terms of generating job descriptions. I mean, especially for recruiting and HR that we announced. And I see a lot of potential for that moving forward for governments across. Now, but being able to reach that stage where you are able to develop generative AI use cases and leverage them requires a certain level of maturity, and not all governments are to that level of maturity. You need the right data, you need the right quality of data, access to the right sources, and so on, and trained skill set probably, and so on and so forth. So, how do you see the maturity across governments? What are their typical challenges? Where are they still investing, or where are they investing mostly these days to get to that level of maturity?
Yeah. So I think different government entities are at different levels of maturity. So we see some entities who are very mature and who are really looking at cutting edge kind of use cases, already have a full infrastructure platform and have launched a lot of different initiatives. But we also see some of them that would have very low maturity who maybe don't know where to start. And I would say first, as a start, when we have companies or entities who would have a low maturity, I think the first step is really to define where they would want to be. So I'd say the first level of investment in data would actually start on setting up a data vision and a data strategy to really define what this roadmap is going to look like. Where can they generate value from data, from collection to usage to activation? So on another aspect, both when it comes to private sector or public sector, we see that there's a lot of processes and activities that are done in a manual way. Some of these analyses that are suboptimal or that don't generate enough insights, or insights that are not possible unless you use AI or machine learning and really start digging into different kind of data sets and data sources. So a lot of investment in this case actually go into the development of data use cases, data and AI use cases. So here it can go from the descriptive use cases to diagnostic, but also getting into the more preemptive and prescriptive kind of use cases where you can actually have a recommendation and really be able to enable the business users to actually make the best decision based on the data that is there. So that actually goes into also knowing that a lot of the data today sits in siloed systems. And specifically when we talk about government, if you look at the government as a whole, this data also sits in different government entities. So having the right infrastructure and the right data platform is really an essential element to be able to start generating and building these kind of use cases, but also to enable the collaboration between different government entities, enable the data sharing and so on. So I would say that the third aspect would definitely be around the data infrastructure and data platforms. And I think one of the aspects that is always maybe perceived as less important, but really one of the critical aspects is data governance. Actually, when we talk about data governance, there's a lot of challenges. So today, if we look at Saudi, UAE, also other markets in the regions, there's a lot of laws and regulations that are coming up. So NDMO, for example, in Saudi, which sets a lot of requirements from a data governance perspective. The UAE data law, which also sets some of the requirements on the data initiatives. Similarly, in other countries, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in Oman, etc. So compliance is one part of data governance, but when we talk about data governance, we also talk about data quality. And especially when we start talking even about generative AI, this is really an essential requirement to be able to generate content accurately and really something that is useful for the business. And we start also looking at AI ethics. So how do you actually use AI in an ethical way? And I would say last but not least, a key area, and I think this is, I would say a bit obvious at this point, is actually about capabilities. And when we look at capabilities, it's the capabilities of the data team. So whether we talk about like data science, data engineering, machine learning, etc., but also the data literacy across organizations. A lot of effort would also have to go into training and upskilling the whole organization in order to start using data. And I think this is actually even showing in the investments that different countries in the region are doing. So in the UAE, for example, one of the key pillars of the UAE AI strategy is around capabilities and skills in technology. Similarly, KSA is investing billions of dollars in education and training, and specifically looking at skills that are related to AI across government employees. So I would say the fifth aspect is also critical to enable such a change in the government.
No, this is great, and a nice, menu of elements that government should start thinking about when looking into, achieving the cream of the crop in terms of maturity and being able to properly utilize their data. This might seem a little bit daunting for some of the governments, especially maybe smaller entities or less mature, entities and governments. So how should they embark on this journey? Do you have any lessons learned that you've helped other entities in the other initiatives and programs that you've launched?
Yes, absolutely. I think the list can be long, so I'll try to focus on the ones that are most important. I think first, it's important to see data not as a pure technical effort. This is a business effort that uses technology and data to support what we're trying to achieve. So I would say first start by defining this vision and strategy in line with the business priorities that we're trying to achieve. I'd say the second point is that a lot of organizations would actually try to kind of go with a big bang approach, and there would be a lot of challenges. I'd say start small, start with what actually has high impact, set the foundations, and based on this, you would be able to start generating value. So really show value fast and then scale accordingly. A third element is definitely do not ignore data governance. It is essential, both on compliance, but also the other aspects related to data quality, data privacy, data accessibility, being able to provide access to the relevant stakeholders. And this is becoming even more important as we talk about generative AI or these kind of technologies. And then when we talk about infrastructure, I think the technologies are changing and are evolving, not just changing. So looking at investing in a scalable and modular technology infrastructure is important while thinking long-term. So where do we want to share data? Do we want to enrich? Do we want to monetize? So really allowing for the scalability. Whenever we look at the data infrastructure, it's really looking at the business and the technical considerations together. I think maybe another lesson learned is that it's very important to have accountability across the organization. Data transformation is not a data team effort. It's a whole organization transformation. This is why we call it transformation. It's not just an initiative that is launched. It's a full-on program. And usually it's very important to have a buy-in from leadership and from management and really to run a change management program. One of the main things that we see being successful is to be able to run these programs on a regular basis, having a continuous monitoring and improvement of the adoption, but also the impact that is generated by the data. And that actually feeds back into showing the value that the data is generating and continuing in this kind of journey.
No, thank you for that. I fully agree. I mean, not just data, all digitization or digital kind of initiatives, they don't tend to pick up, or not to avoid saying the word fail, if it's not really driven and have the right buy-in and support from the business and the tools these days. They make it easier for business to engage and to leverage the value of data and digitization in general. So fully agreed, and thank you for sharing those lessons learned. And thank you for your time today, Christelle. Great insights, and always great engaging and discussing data topics with you.
Thank you, Tare, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.